So let's properly frame this discussion by starting out with a solid definition of loneliness and how loneliness is distinctly different from being alone or finding solitude or even being an introvert.
Sure. So I had a moment this morning. It was 6:30, and I was sitting in a rocking chair in my daughter's room, and it was the whole household was quiet, and I was like, that's solitude, that feeling of like, nobody needs me for something. I just have me and my thoughts and like a cup of tea or my mug of coffee, and I can just quietly sit. That's a good thing. That's rejuvenating time when we can be alone with our thoughts and be creative or just relax and kind of get ourselves ready for what the day has in store for us, or if it's at the end of the day, it's just unwinding from the day. And all of us need moments of solitude. Some of us, crave it more than others. Some of us need it more than others. There's one end of the spectrum where you have monks who live in isolation and they're happy on a mountaintop with nobody, and the other end of the spectrum where people just need a moment. That's solitude. Loneliness is the feeling that you want to be more connected with people and you're not. It's the gap between I wish I could share a meal with somebody. I wish I had somebody I could call. I'm feeling like I'm not sure whether I matter to somebody in this moment. Sort of all of these sort of like thoughts that can go through our head are can be translated into loneliness. We don't always recognize it as the word lonely, but it is that feeling that, oh, I want to be with people, whether that's in person or on the phone, and you're not getting that connection. So some people need to be more connected with others. More extroverted people need to be around people more, and so they're more prone to loneliness when they're on their own, when they are alone. And some people are more introverted, and they're they might need smaller doses of social connection. And then the other thing that I'll say is that it is I'm sure we've all experienced this, it is absolutely possible to be in a crowd of people and even be surrounded by people who love you, and still feel lonely, because for some reason you're not feeling that sense of connection in that moment, or in your life in general, to feel like you're getting what you need in that very moment.
Okay. So one more question and then I'll turn things over to you, Janine. So we're an organization that focuses on women's health. We're mothers, daughters, sisters, wives, aunties. What are some of the ways that loneliness and social isolation impact women, and why is that?
So as you kind of quoted in the intro, loneliness can have a surprising number of impacts on our physical health, and the reason for that, someone wants to join in.
Yes. Welcome.
She always wants to snuggle during Zooms.
That's fine.
The reason for that is that we actually evolved to need other human beings around us. And not only to need people for, back in our hunter-gatherer days, we needed people to watch out for predators, and we needed people to help us, gather and hunt for all the food so that we wouldn't go hungry one day if we weren't feeling well. And that kind of got baked into our system, so that our bodies react when we are feeling alone. We go into a bit of that like fight or flight stage. We're thinking, oh my gosh, I need to find my tribe so I don't get eaten by a lion. We still have all of that in our systems, even though most of us hopefully aren't in danger of being eaten by that lion. And so our bodies react with go into that heightened state. And when we're chronically lonely, that can impact all kinds of systems. So we can have more depression and anxiety. We can have more heart disease, more dementia. It can affect our physical health in multiple ways. I think for women in particular, I think that, it's always hard to generalize men and women, and you always get into a little bit of pitfalls. But I think in general, women are more sort of the community builders, the caretakers. That's sort of like a role that we sort of like take on to ourselves. And so when we feel lonely, we can feel like I'm not fulfilling the role that I am supposed to be, because here I am on my own feeling alone. And so those impacts can be can feel sharper and more heightened, because we because that the feeling of loneliness not only sort of impacts our health, but it also makes us a little bit more suspicious of the world, which makes us less likely to reach out. And it can be this vicious cycle. So now I'm on my own. I think a lion might eat me. So every single rustle in the bushes, it could be danger. Every strange looking person could be some foreign tribe that's trying to spear me. And so even people that we know well, we kind of like, like, why are they calling me? I'm not sure if I want to engage. I'm on edge. And all of that vicious cycle can just make the loneliness worse. It can make our physical impacts worse.
That's very interesting, Dr. Chen. And I love your example of, you know, our being perhaps in a state of, the why, or being suspicious of, why are people trying to reach out to us? And my question, I have a why. Why and how did you become so deeply involved in this topic, in loneliness and social isolation? What is a symptom?
It's happened by accident. But once it sort of appeared, it was like, of course, this is something that is so fundamental to our ability to be happy and to thrive as individuals, as a community, as a society. Today is the day after the 9/11 anniversary. And I can't believe it's been almost 20 years. And every year during the anniversary, and so often I think about what I was doing around that time. So I was in my third week of medical school in New York City when 9/11 happened. Just brand new to the big city, so exciting. I was like, oh my gosh. And it was obviously a very traumatic experience for everybody. And one of the things that I got to do in the aftermath of 9/11 was I became a volunteer caseworker for the American Red Cross, which I did in afternoons after class. And we would, so we were helping the people who had been economically devastated by what happened. So they lived in Lower Manhattan. They could no longer, their food truck, nobody was coming. They were a chauffeur for these fancy tall office buildings, and nobody know the office buildings weren't there anymore. They worked in a sewing factory that was shut down because they couldn't get any goods in and out. And so many of these people were feeling so ashamed that they couldn't work, they couldn't feed their families, they didn't know where their rent was going to come from, and they didn't make it, and like their American dream wasn't working, like it was their fault. And what we did in this service center was we brought people in the idea was to provide them with some financial assistance and sort of like counseling and whatever people needed. But when I got trained, my trainer told me the first thing you do, we have this big form that you have to fill out, but the first thing that you do when a client sits in front of you is you put down your pen and you listen. And I would see these people, they'd come in and their shoulders would be hunched over and they'd be looking at the floor and kind of shuffling in, and you'd sit them down and you say, okay, just tell me, how are you? Put down your pen. And you could just kind of see that light start to glimmer in their eyes. And as they talked and were able to share their story and didn't get judged for it, and you'd be like, this is what everybody's going through. It's not your fault. You just see their shoulders kind of coming up, and their whole demeanor would change. And then we'd provide them with the assistance that they needed, and they kind of walk out of there, kind of sailed out of there, I'm gonna make it. Huh. And that experience, time and time again, just showed me so much how that human connection between two people can be so impactful. And it wasn't something particular to me. It was just having some stranger say, you matter, and I'm going to listen to you. And it was that experience, so many experiences of taking care of patients in the hospital who were lonely, who felt like they just wanted to know, do people care that I'm here? It just made me realize how much it is how fundamental it is to everything that we do, to the way we go about our lives. We think about, it's a political season this year, whether or not people are engaging in voting or getting involved in civic participation is whether or not you feel like you matter to the society around you. And so this conversation around loneliness and social isolation and how connected we are to the world around us is so important to everything in life. And so once that all gelled, and it helps that my husband is interested in the same topic, so we can talk about it together. It just kind of became obvious. This is something that's crucial to work on.
Thank you. Thank you for that. This is we realize, and the more I began to learn more about loneliness and social isolation in preparation for this discussion, I realized that both, young and older adults are experiencing and have experienced both. And I'm wondering if you could describe both conditions, perhaps profiling someone, someone that you've met along the way or that you've counseled in some way, to help us. I know you started out giving sort of painting a picture between the difference of someone who's socially isolated and someone who is who may perhaps be dealing with loneliness. But how, in using a profile, how would you help, further help to describe both conditions?
Sure. So at risk of keeping talking about myself.
Well, we're here to hear from you.
Personal thing. I was just thinking about my first year of residency training. I moved from New York City to Los Angeles, where I didn't really know anybody. And I was in my residency training. So I was in the hospital all day, every day. I was always surrounded with people. I was taking care of patients. I had, classmates who would say like, hey, everybody, we're going out tonight. Tonight we're going here and tonight we're going there, and let's all get together and let's get to know each other and let's all meet. And there was so much human connection that I was having. And I was one of those docs who likes to sit around and chitty chat with my patients all day long. And so I had plenty of connection. But at the end of the day, when I went home, I would sit in front of my computer and play solitaire and feel lonely and like I wanted to call my friends and I wanted to call my family and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And people would call me and I'd be like, and I'd see these emails coming in of like going out to a bar and be like, I'm not a bar person, like that. They don't mean that. They're not inviting me. I'm not included in this group. And that's the feeling of being lonely, but not socially isolated.